Okay, get this. What if we could treat a child's brain, a brain that's still growing and changing, not with drugs, but with light? I know, it sounds like something straight out of science fiction, but it is a very real technology being tested as we speak. So today, we're diving into the most important question of all. Is it safe?
So yeah, just imagine a therapy with no pills and no surgery. All it uses is a very specific kind of light pointed at the brain to help it heal, to help it work better. This is the incredible idea we're going to unpack today.
And this isn't just a wild theory. For adults, this technology is already showing massive potential. We're seeing really promising results in treating some of the toughest neurological conditions we know of. Everything from helping people recover from strokes, to easing depression, and even tackling Alzheimer's. The possibilities are just enormous.
So what do we call this thing? Well, it has a bit of a mouthful for a scientific name, Photobiomodulation, or PBM for short. Let's break down what that actually means and, how it really works.
You can basically think of PBM as a gentle energy drink for your brain cells. It uses this very specific wavelength of near-infrared light to give a little boost to the mitochondria. You remember those, the tiny power plants inside all our cells. This extra energy helps the cells survive, repair themselves, and just plain function better. It's a totally non-invasive way to give the brain a little helping hand.
Now this all sounds pretty fantastic for grown-ups, but it brings us to a really critical fork in the road. What happens when you use this technology on a brain that's not even done cooking yet? This is where that question of safety becomes everything.
And that right there is the central question of this whole explainer. A child's brain, an adolescent's brain, it's a work in progress. It is developing at this unbelievable pace. And that makes it fundamentally different and, yeah, potentially a lot more vulnerable than an adult brain.
Think about it like this. A developing brain is what scientists call highly plastic. It's like soft clay, constantly changing, forming new connections in this incredibly delicate dance. An adult brain, on the other hand, is more like fired pottery. It's more stable, it's more resilient. So you have to ask, could a therapy that helps the finished pot actually mess up the clay?
And listen, this is not some theoretical what-if question for the future. Researchers are already running clinical studies using PBM to treat neurodevelopmental disorders like autism and ADHD in kids. The potential benefits could be absolutely life-changing, which makes it so urgent that we figure out if it's safe.
So how do you even test for something like that? Well, a recent study did exactly that. They designed a really clever experiment to look for any signs of trouble in a young, developing brain. The researchers had a really clear 4-step plan. First, they used young rats because their brain development is a great stand-in for key parts of human development. Then, they used a very common PBM treatment, that's the 810 nanometer light, for 5 days in a row. After that, they looked at 2 super important brain areas involved in learning and emotion. And finally, this is the most important part, they looked for one specific danger signal, neuroinflammation.
Okay, so to get what neuroinflammation is, you need to know about glial cells. Just think of them as the brain's first responders, its own little paramedic squad and security team. There are 2 key types, astrocytes and microglia. And when they sense any danger, like an injury or an infection, they activate and sound the alarm, kicking off an inflammatory response to deal with whatever the threat is. So the whole experiment really boiled down to this one simple question. Was this PBM light therapy accidentally triggering those first responders? Was it basically sounding a false alarm and causing a bunch of unnecessary inflammation in a perfectly healthy, developing brain?
And that brings us to the results. After running the whole experiment, the scientists got to work analyzing the brain tissue. So, what did they find?
First, they checked on the astrocytes, one type of the brain's first responders. What this chart is showing us is their activity levels. And the key thing to see here, the PBM group, the one that got the light, shows no more activity than the other groups. The astrocytes were totally calm. First check, clear. So what about the microglia, the brain's main immune cells? Well, it was the exact same story. You can see it right here on the chart. The light therapy group shows no difference at all compared to the controls. The brain's immune group just stayed quiet. But they didn't stop there. For the final check, they went a level deeper, measuring the actual molecular alarm signals, these things called cytokines, that the cells would release if there was a problem. And again, the results were crystal clear. No increase, no inflammatory signals. The alarm was never pulled. So after checking the cells themselves and then checking the signals they send, the verdict was in. Under these conditions, the light therapy did not cause any neuroinflammation that they could detect, not a single sign of it.
I mean, that is just incredibly reassuring news, but what does it mean for the big picture? Let's talk about what this means for the future of PBM.
You don't have to take my word for it. The study's authors really put it perfectly themselves. They said this work provides that initial, critical piece of evidence that PBM might just be safe for a brain that's still growing up. It suggests you can use it without ringing all those inflammatory alarm bells we were worried about.
So let's just recap. This is a vital first step. It gives us strong evidence that, at least with this specific technique, PBM appears to be safe. But, and this is super important to remember, this is just one study. We are going to need a lot more research to confirm these findings before this can become a therapy that's widely used for kids. But this foundational safety check, it just opens the door to so many incredible possibilities. It lets us ask, with a good dose of cautious optimism, what's next? If this technology is proven to be safe, what other complicated childhood conditions, things beyond even ASD and ADHD, could we one day treat with the simple, non-invasive power of light? Makes you think, right?